everyone. Hello gamers, hello chat. But being much later than I thought. There was an emergency meeting at my job, and then I had to work for an additional, like what, 2.5 hours? Yeah, sounds about right. Damn. But I did manage to get my hair cut. It's a long time coming. I don't like my hair being long and then having it on my eyebrow and near my face, near my eyes. It's very distracting for me to have that. To really read much into it, the myth of normal that I wanted to read tonight. I mean, because the additional job, but I did manage to read past the preface, the opening segment of the book. It's basically said that because of the condition of the current world, which is very abnormal, there's unchecked capitalism that is causing most of the issue we have, like Western imperialism, American exceptionalism, Israel exceptionalism, and climate change, and so many other, wage gap, and the internet being more mean, basically. So what used to be the standard of normal, the base standard of normal for mental health and maybe even physical health, needs to be changed because the world itself is abnormal. And this is basically Gabor Mate's attempt at creating the new base standard for what is normal. So which is why the title is The Myth of Normal. I haven't read much into the book, not even the first chapter, so if I have more comment about the book, I'll have to wait until after I actually got into the book. A little bit of things or matters. Romance. Maybe? I don't know. Let's go with that, I guess. It's funny that there's a Transformer sticker, especially with who's this guy? I forgot. Not Metatron. Metatron is the bad guy. Optimus Prime. Yeah, because the James Cameron, that explosion director guy. His Optimus is a maniac. What's to happen? It might not be anything we can discuss. Obviously, so nothing has to be stops to happen. I'm not into astrology, unfortunately. That's funny though. Roast my toxic ex. to read. I can't bring that long because I started so late. Maybe another hour. Yeah, it is almost 8. I can stream maybe until 9. So hey, an hour of whatever this is. Still had some work left. I still don't know. I think everything went well with the extra work, which is good to hear, because that means tomorrow there's less work. Okay. Nature. Because we think in a fragmentary way, we see fragments, and this way of seeing leads us to make actual fragments of the world. Susan Griffin, A Chorus of Stones. Because we think in a fragmentary way, we see fragments, and this way of seeing leads us to make actual fragments of the world. Most of the time we see this online when people say tunnel vision and echo chambers. It's usually because of people seeing the world only from fragments instead of the whole part. It happens. The last place you want to be. The last place you want to be. That's of trauma. It is hard to imagine the scope of an individual life without envisioning some kind of trauma, and it is hard for most people to know what to do about it, notwithstanding the trauma of everyday life. Picture this. At the tender age of 71, 6 years before this film, The authors arrived back in Vancouver from speaking town to Philadelphia. The talk was successful, the audience enthusiastic. My message about addiction and trauma's impact on people's life broadly received. I've traveled in unexpected comfort, having been upgraded to the business class cabin thanks to a courtesy from Air Canada, descending over Vancouver's pristine sea-to-sky panorama, and regularly told Jack Homer in my corner of the plane, suffers with a "What a good boy am I" flow. What a good boy am I flow. As we touched down and began to taxi to the gate, the text from my wife Ray lights up the tiny screen. "Sorry, I haven't left home yet. Do you still want me to come?" Stephen. Satisfaction displaced by rage. "Never mind," I dictate tersely into the phone. In Pizza, I disembark, get a custom, and take a taxi home, all of a 20-minute ride door to door. I thought the reader is already gripping the page in empathetic outrage at the indignity suffered by your author. Finally, I grow there is more accusation than greeting, and scarcely look at her. In fact, I barely make eye contact the next day for hours. When I dress, I utter little more than three monotone grunts. My gaze is averted. The upper part of my face tense and rigid, and my jaw is in a perma clench. What is happening with me? Is this the response of a mature adult in his 8th decade? Only superficially. At times like this, there is very little grown-up gabor in the mix. Most of me is in the grips of the distant past, near the beginnings of my life. This kind of physio-emotional time warp, preventing me from inhabiting the present moment, is one of the imprints of trauma, an underlying theme for many people in this culture. In fact, it is so deeply underlying that many of us don't know it's there. The meaning of the word trauma is, in its Greek origin, is wound. Whether we realize it or not, it is our woundedness or how we cope with it that dictates much of our behavior, shapes our social habits, and informs our ways of thinking about the world. It can even determine whether or not we are capable of rational thought at all in matters of the greatest importance to our lives. For many of us, it rears its head in our closest partnership, causing all kind of relation mischief. It was in 1889 that the pioneering French physiologist Pierre Janet first depicted traumatic memory as being held in automatic action and reaction, sensation and attitudes replayed and reenacted in visceral sensations. In the present century, the leading trauma psychologist and healer Peter Levine has written that certain shocks to the organism can alter a person's biological, physiological, and social equilibrium to such a degree that the memory of one particular event comes to taint and dominate all other experiences, spoiling an appreciation of the present moment. Levine calls this the tyranny of the past. In my case, the template for my hostility to race message is to be bound in the diary my mother kept, in a nearly illegible scroll and only intermittently. During my first year in wartime and post-World War II Budapest, the following, translated by me from Hungarian, is her entry on April 8, 1945, when I was 14 months old. My dear little man, my dear little man, only after many long months do I take my hands again the pen. Do I take in hand again the pen, so that I may briefly sketch for you the unspeakable horror of those times, the detail of which I do not wish you to know. It was on December 12 that the cross arrow forced us into the fence in Budapest Ghetto, from which with extreme difficulty we found refuge in a Swiss protected house. From there, after 2 days, I sent you by a complete stranger to your Aunt Viola's, because I saw that your little organism could not possibly endure the living condition in that building. Now began the most dreadful 5 or 6 weeks of my life, when I couldn't see you." End quote. The cross arrow is the viciously anti-Semitic fascist Hungarian political movement and paramilitary allied with the Nazi occupier. I survived thanks to the kindness and courage of the unknown Christian woman to whom my mother entrusted me in the street and who conveyed me to relatives living in hiding under relatively safer circumstances. Reunited with my mother after the Soviet army had put the Germans to flight, I did not so much as look at her for several days. The great 20th century British psychiatrist and psychologist John Bowlby was familiar with such behavior. He called it detachment. At his clinic, he observed 10 small children who had to endure prolonged separation from their parents due to uncontrollable circumstances. On meeting mother for the first time, after days or weeks away, every one of the children showed some degree of detachment, Bowlby observed. 2 seemed not to recognize mother. The other 8 turned away or even walked away from her. Most of them either cried or came close to tears. A number alternated between a tearful and expressionless face. It may seem counterintuitive, but this reflexive rejection of the loving mother is an adaptation. I was so hurt when you abandoned me, says the young child's mind. I will not reconnect with you. I don't dare open myself back then again. In my children, I was certainly one. Early reaction like this became embedded in the nervous system, mind and body, playing havoc with future relationships. They show up throughout the lifetime in response to an incident, even vaguely resembling the original imprint, often without any recall of the inciting circumstances. My pattern and defensive reaction to race ignited all big brain emotional circuits, programmed in infancy, had taken over while rational calming, self-regulating parts of my brain went offline. All trauma is reversible, psychiatrist Bessel van der Kolk has written. His statement is true in 2 senses. First, the psychic wounds we sustain are often inflicted upon us before our brain is capable of formulating any kind of verbal narrative, as in my case. Second, even after we become language endowed, some wounds are imprinted on regions of our nervous system having nothing to do with language or concepts. This includes brain areas, of course, but the rest of the body too. They are stored in parts of us that words and thoughts cannot directly access. The background called this level of traumatic encoding subverbal. As Peter Levine explained, conscious explicit memory is only the proverbial tip of a very big and mighty iceberg. It barely hints at the surface strata of primal implicit experience that moves us in ways the conscious mind can only begin to imagine. Okay, so there are 2 parts where trauma affect us subconsciously. First, even before it enter into our thought, which is why a lot of the coping mechanism is bad, because it is not registered yet in our brain. And there's the second part. Strata of primal explicit experience, imprinted on a region of our nervous system having nothing to do with language or concept. So the trauma is safe, very deep in us, so deep that sometimes it is hard to recognize or even be aware of them. It's, we've seen them, so there is that. Okay. To her credit, my wife will not allow me to get away with pinning the entire blame for my arrival, get hissy fit on Nazis and fascists and even trauma. Yes, see, the backstory merits compassion and understanding, and she has given me an abundance of both. But there comes a point when Hitler made me do it won't fly. Responsibility can and must be taken. After 24 hours of the silent treatment, Ray had had enough. Oh, knock it off already, she said, and so I did. A measure of progress and relative maturation on my part. In times past, it would have taken me days or longer to knock it off, to drop my resentment and for my core to unfreeze, my face to relight, my voice to soften, and my head to turn willingly and with love towards my life partner. My problem is that I am married to someone who understands me. I often grumble, only partly in jest. Really, of course, my great blessing is to be married to someone with healthy boundaries, who sees me as I am now and who will no longer bear the brunt of my prolonged and unplanned visits to the distant past. A lot of the problem with the internet today is the mean part of the internet. A lot of them, if you look into them, they are projecting their own insecurity and immaturity to the world, to the people around them. So because they're miserable, other people have to also be as miserable as them. And when you're younger, sure, I guess it's more understandable, even if it's not excusable that you do that. But once you grow old enough and you haven't matured yet to recognize that there are some responsibility that you need to take, so you don't do those anymore, or at least knock it off faster, as the author said here. What trauma is and what it does. Trauma's impact is more endemic than we realize. The amazing or passing statement as trauma has become something of a catchword in our society. To quit, the word has taken on a number of colloquial balances that confuse and dilute its meaning. A clear and comprehensive reckoning is warranted, especially in the field of health, and since everything is connected, in virtually all the societal domains as well. The usual conception of trauma conjures up notion of catastrophic events, hurricanes, abuse, egregious neglect, and war. This has the unintended and misleading effect of relegating trauma to the realm of the abnormal, the unusual, the exceptional. If there exists a class of people we call traumatized, that must mean that most of us are not. Here we miss the mark by a wide margin. Trauma pervades all culture, from personal function through social relationship, parenting, education, popular culture, economics, and politics. In fact, someone without the mark of trauma would be an outlier in our society. We are closer to the truth than yes, where to each weight on the broad and surprisingly inclusive trauma spectrum, which of its many marks has each of us carried all or most of our life, and what have the impacts been? What possibilities will open up were we to become more familiar, even intimate with them? The more basic question comes first: what is trauma? As I use the word trauma is an inner injury, a lasting rupture or split within the self due to difficult or hurtful events. By this definition, trauma is primarily what happens within someone as a result of the difficulty or hurtful events that befall them. It is not the events themselves. Trauma is not what happens to you, but what happens inside you, is how I formulate it. Think of a car accident where someone sustained a concussion. The accident is what happened, the injury is what lasts. Likewise, trauma is a physical injury, lodged in your nervous system, mind and body, lasting long past the originating incidents, triggerable at any moment. It is a constellation of hardship, composed of the wound itself and the residual burdens that our woundedness imposes on our bodies and soul. The unresolved emotion they visit upon us, the coping dynamics they dictate, the tragic or melodramatic or neurotic scripts we unwittingly but inexorably live out, and at least the toll this takes on our bodies. When a wound doesn't know on its own, one of two things will happen. It can either remain raw or more commonly be replaced by a thick layer of scar tissue. As an open sore, it is an ongoing source of pain and a place where we can be hurt over and over again by even the slightest stimulus. It compels us to be ever vigilant, always nursing our wounds, as it were, and leaves us limited in our capacity to move flexibly and act confidently lest we be harmed again. The scar is preferable, providing protection and holding tissues together, but it has its drawbacks. It is tight, hot, inflexible, unable to grow, a zone of numbness. The original healthy alive flesh is not regenerated. Raw wound or scar, unresolved trauma, is a constriction of the self, both physical and psychological. It constrains our inborn capacities and generates an enduring distortion of our view of the world and of other people. That's what I mean. One of the coping mechanisms of trauma is an unhealthy projection of our view that is distorted by the trauma. For example, if because of our trauma we become someone who is not genuine in our response to other people, and because of that, when we see other people being genuine, we see them as being performative instead. Because if the trauma, for example, if me is I am traumatic and I cannot be genuine, that means other people also cannot be genuine, and that is how trauma distorts our view of the world and of other people. And trauma, until we work it through, keeps us stuck in the past. Robbing us of the present moments reaches, limiting who we can be by impelling us to suppress hurts and unwanted parts of the psyche. It fragments the self until seen and acknowledged. It is also a barrier to growth. In many cases, as in mine, it blinds a person's sense of worth, poisons relationships, and undermines appreciation for life itself. Early in childhood may even interfere with healthy brain development, and as we will witness, trauma is an antecedent and a contributor to illness of all kinds throughout the lifespan. Taken together, these impacts constitute a major and foundational impediment to flourishing for many people. To quote Peter Levine once more, trauma is perhaps the most avoided, ignored, belittled, denied, misunderstood, and untreated cause of human suffering. Take a rest and swear more letters. Why not? Don't know about that one, but that's what I got. Context that I don't have that. People wrote this waiting for a reply, right? So I do want I want to give a good reply, I guess. I don't know the words for it. I would like more context, but for now, that's about all the answer I can give. Hey, that's mine. I can receive my own letter. A little space for everything. Sticker boba and precision. Okay, two types of trauma. Before we go on, let's distinguish two forms of trauma. The first, the sense in which clinicians and teachers like Levine and Van der Kolk usually employ the word. Involves automatic responses and mind-body adaptation to specific, identifiable, hurtful, and overwhelming events, whether in childhood or later. As my medical work taught me, and as research has amply shown, painful things happen to many children, from outright abuse or severe neglect in the family of origin to the poverty or racism or oppression that are daily features of many societies. The consequences can be terrible. Though more common than usually acknowledged, such traumas give rise to multiple symptoms and syndromes and to conditions diagnosed as pathology, physical or mental. A linkage that remains almost invisible to the eyes of mainstream medicine and psychiatry, except in specific diseases like post-traumatic stress disorder. This kind of injury has been called by some capital T trauma. It underlines much of what gets labeled as mental illness. It also creates a predisposition to physical illness by driving inflammation, elevating physiological stress, and impairing the healthy function of genes, among many other mechanisms. To sum up then, capital T trauma occurs when things happen to vulnerable people that should not have happened, as, for example, a child being abused or violence in the family, or a rancorous divorce, or the loss of a parent. All these are among the criteria for childhood affliction in the well-known adverse childhood experiences case studies. Once again, the traumatic event themselves are not identical to trauma, the injury to self, that occurs in their immediate wake within the person. There is another form of trauma, and this is the kind I am calling nearly universal in our culture. There has sometimes been termed small d trauma. I have often witnessed what long-lasting marks seemingly ordinary event, the seminal researchers poignantly called the less memorable but hurtful and far more prevalent misfortune of childhood, can live on the psyches of children. This might include bullying by peers, the casual but repeated harsh comments of well-meaning parents, or even just a lack of sufficient emotional connection with nurturing adults. Children, especially highly sensitive children, can be wounded in multiple ways. By bad things happening, yes, but also by good things not happening, such as their emotional needs for attunement not being met, or the experience of not being seen and accepted even by loving parents. Trauma of this kind does not require overt distress or misfortune of the sort mentioned above and can also lead to the pain of disconnection from the self, occurring as a result of core needs not being satisfied. Such non-events are what the British pediatrician D.W. Winnicott referred to as nothing happening when something might profitably have happened. A subject we will return to when we consider human development. The traumas of everyday life can easily make us feel like a motherless child, wrote the psychiatrist Mark Epstein. If, despite decades of evidence, the big T trauma has barely registered on the medical radar screen, small T trauma does not even cause blip, even as we make this distinction between big T and small T traumas. Given the continuum and broad spectrum of human experience, let's keep in mind that in real life the lines are fluid, are not easily drawn, and should not be rigidly maintained. But the two types here is succinctly summarized by Bessel van der Kolk. Trauma is when we are not seen and known. Although there are dramatic differences in the way the two forms of trauma can affect people's life and functioning, the big T variety in general being far more distressing and disabling, there is also much overlap. They both represent a fracturing of the self and of one's relationship to the world. That fracturing is the essence of trauma. As Peter Levine writes, trauma is about a loss of connection to ourselves, our families, and the world around us. This loss is hard to recognize because it happens slowly over time. We adapt to these subtle changes. Sometimes without noticing them, as the lost connection gets internalized, it falls our view of reality, come to believe in the world we see through its cracked lens. It is sobering to realize that we take ourselves to be in the ways we habitually act, including many of our seeming strengths. The least and the most functional aspect of our normal self are often, in part, the wages of traumatic loss. It may also be disconcerting for many of us to consider that, as happy and well-adjusted as we think ourselves to be, we may fall somewhere on the trauma spectrum, even if far from the capital T pole. Ultimately, comparison fails. It doesn't matter whether we can point to other people who seem more traumatized than we are, or there is no comparing suffering. Nor is it appropriate to use our own trauma as a way of placing ourselves above others. We haven't suffered like I have, or as a cudgel to beat back others' legitimate grievances when we behave destructively. We each carry our wound in our own way. There is neither sense nor value in gouging them against those of others. The trauma is not. Most of us have heard someone, perhaps ourselves, say something like, "Oh my god, that movie last night was so disturbing," and after the other traumatized. Or we've read a typically dismissive news story about university students agitating for content warning lest they be re-traumatized by what they hear. In all these cases, the usage is understandable but misplaced. What people are actually referring to in these cases is stress, physical and or emotional, as Peter Levine aptly points out. Certainly, all traumatic events are stressful, but not all stressful events are traumatic. An event is traumatizing or re-traumatizing only if it renders one diminished, which is to say, psychically or physically more limited than before in a way that persists. Much in life, including in art or social intercourse or politics, may be upsetting, distressing, even very painful without being newly traumatic. That is not to say that all traumatic reaction having nothing to do with whatever's going on cannot be triggered by present-day stresses. See, for example, a certain author driving home from a speaking gig. That is not the same as being re-traumatized, unless over time it leaves us even more constricted than before. Here's a fairly reliable process for elimination checklist. There is no trauma if the following remain true over the long term. 1. It does not limit you, constrict you, diminish your capacity to feel or think or to trust or assert yourself, to experience suffering without succumbing to despair or to witness it with compassion. 2. It does not keep you from holding your pain and sorrow and fear without being overwhelmed and without having to escape habitually into work or compulsive self-soothing or self-stimulating by whatever means. 3. You are not left compelled either to aggrandize yourself or to efface yourself for the sake of gaining acceptance or to justify your existence. And 4. It does not impair your capacity to experience gratitude for the beauty and wonder of life. If, on the other hand, you do recognize those chronic constraints in yourself, they might well represent trauma shadow on your psyche, the presence of an unhealed emotional wound, no matter the size of the deep. Trauma separates us from our bodies. When somebody has invaded you and entered you, your body is no longer yours. The writer V, formerly known as Eve Ensler, told me, recalling her sexual abuse by her father as a young girl, "It's a landscape of dread and betrayal and sorrow and cruelty. The last place you want to be is in your body." And so you begin to live in your head. You begin to live up here without any ability to protect your body, to know your body. Look, I had a tumor the size of an avocado inside me, and I didn't know it. That's how separated I was from myself. Although the details of my past diverge widely from his, I know whereof she speaks. For many years, the most difficult question that could be put to me was, "Why are you feeling?" My customary response was an irritated, "How should I know? I face no such problem when being asked what my thoughts were, on those I am a damned expert." Not knowing how or what one feels, on the other hand, is a sure sign of disconnect from the body. What causes such disconnect? In my case, the answer requires no speculation. As an infant in wartime Hungary, I endured chronic hunger and dysentery, states of acute discomfort threatening and distressing to adult, let alone to 1-year-old. I also observed the terrors and unrelenting emotional distress of my mother. In the absence of relief, a young person's natural response, their only response really, is to repress and disconnect from the feeling state associated with suffering. One no longer knows one's body. Oddly, this self-estrangement can show up later in life in the form of an apparent strength, such as my ability to perform at a high level when hungry or stressed or fatigued, pushing up without awareness of my need for both nutrition or rest. Alternatively, some people's disconnection from their bodies manifests as not knowing when to stop eating or drinking. The enough signal doesn't get through. In whatever form, disconnection is prominent in the life experience of traumatized people and is an essential aspect of the trauma constellation. As was the case for V, it begins as a natural coping mechanism on the organism part, and a mandatory one. She could not have survived her childhood horrors had she stayed present in and aware of her moment-by-moment experience of physical and emotional torment, fully taking in what was happening, and so the coping mechanisms right in her wings of grace, as it were, to save our life in the short term. Over time, though, if untended to, they become stem on the psyche and soma, indelibly so, as conditioned responses harden into fixed mechanisms that no longer suits the situation. The result is chronic suffering, and frequently, as we will proceed to explore, even disease. What was so remarkable about my encounter with cancer, he told me, was that the whole journey from waking up after 9 hours surgery and losing several organs and several nodes, I woke up with bags and tubes and everything coming out of me, but for the first time in my life, I was a body. It was painful, but it was also exhilarating. It was like, I'm a body, oh my god, I'm here, I'm inside this body. Her account of a sudden at-homeness in her physical self is emblematic of how healing works. When trauma shackles begin to loose, we gladly reunite with the severed part of ourselves. That's nice. It's not nice that she has to live through that, but it's nice that she is healing. You know. That made me want to answer some more letters. So the best friend, I know if I can live without her. worth this. Good enough. Spirit Pharaoh is so good. The rest is also good. Like Spirit Pharaoh and Grace, huh? whenever I play that is more relaxing. Pocket shop. That is not relaxing at all. Gris. I've played quite a lot of games. Even though it hasn't been that long since I've started streaming. I don't know if that's a good thing or not. I like doing them. I forgot what the space ones are, but that's more like a visual novel. So, Citizen Sleeper. It's also really good. Oh yeah, Tunnel Country. Is Inscription relaxing? I don't think so. There's also the one I played recently with Kevin Penkin's song. I forgot the name of the game. Also so fun. Isn't that here? That's weird. Did YouTube delete them? Oh, it's gone. That's weird. It's almost 9. I still want to read more, but I don't think I can do them on stream. It's just reply a couple more letters and then I'll end the stream. I need to rest because tomorrow is another work day, and also my schedule for the gym of the week of the first workout of the week. This one I cannot answer because I don't know any podcast like that. First step for getting out of my hanging around too long mode. It kinda lets me hang around forever. Now it's longer since second year, it's hard to talk. I don't know what they meant by this. Pick up for 3 weeks now. Hang around after customers? That's what I mean. Yes. I don't know what this means. Sorry, my guy. Your employment, you mean? I don't think you need an answer for this one. lucky enough that I don't have any chronic illness. But that doesn't mean I don't have any journey to share. I know Iron Mouse, which is a streamer that have a chronic illness, but Okay, this is the one that I don't know PS4 for. So I think that's a good time for me to go off. It's a short stream because I was delayed from work Thank you. Hopefully, tomorrow will be better. Hopefully, we'll see. See you guys tomorrow. Okay?